Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the brand new Burial EP, Rival Dealer. Burial is the pseudonym of a famed UK-based electronic music producer, very well known in the circles of dubstep, two-step, future garage, and his very atmospheric, detailed, and moody approach to these genres has earned him quite a bit of praise with electronic music fans and critics. But ever since his last full-length LP, Untrue, which he dropped in the late 2000s, he's been releasing EP after EP with a handful of tracks on each one. And a part of me has actually enjoyed a little bit more what he's been doing on these EPs as opposed to his LPs, because I think as he's been releasing more music, his sound has been getting more progressive. Longer, more expansive tracks, more detail, more sound play. So considering I pretty much liked everything that Burial has put out as of late, I was looking forward to what he was doing on this newest EP, Rival Dealer. However, I can't say I like this thing. It's just one of those moments where an artist who has impressed you on numerous occasions with release after release totally changes directions and changes sound in a pretty big way, and the end result is a little disappointing. I think diehards will be into what Burial is doing on this EP, even if it is for kind of a one-off, but a lot of this EP did not sit well with me. However, there were high points on here, most notably the title track, a song that is not in Burial's typical style, but still very well produced and chock full of these break beats with just whiffs of drum and bass influence. And throughout a great deal of this pretty long track, 10 plus minutes, you're getting these speedy, cacophonous drum rhythms repeated over and over, and it's being colored with all these ethereal sound effects and noises, a really epic synth line, and this really filthy, grimy bass line that I like a lot. It's just got a lot of... And there are all of these lo-fi vocal cuts that are sort of playing in the background. I would say the mix is a little muddy with all of these sounds bleeding into one another, and the vocals are maybe the most obscured part of the whole mix. It sounds like there's a touch of auto-tune on them, but with just how bountiful the entire song is, with just how many sounds it throws at you, it doesn't really overtake the track too much. It doesn't really become a standout characteristic. It's just a subtle addition to an interesting track and sort of plays its role as a bit of a distortion effect on the vocal, which is already pretty obscured by just the muddiness. There are these abstract interludes that sort of interrupt throughout the track, and then in the halfway point of the song, the beat changes up and we get this driving 4/4 rhythm. There's an ambient outro, some interesting spoken word as well. Overall, this song is really heavy, it's enveloping. However, the other two tracks on this thing, I can't say I really care for them at all. And for pretty much the same reasons between these two tracks. For one, the shortest song on this EP, Hiders, seems like a great idea at first, with Burial introducing these very slow-moving, glistening piano chords that are very tender, very pretty, very evocative. I was sort of being moved by this song as it was just plodding on with this very pretty set of chords. Na, 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 na. Very grand, very uplifting, but then this auto-tuned lead vocal comes in to sing over it, and it just sounds awful. I could understand the vocal working on the title track from this thing because of how buried it was and all of the muck and just how heavy and visceral the song was, but to me this vocal on Hiders is really an emotional focus of the track that doesn't really convey or work in terms of an emotional tool. It doesn't really make me want to do anything but just... The song goes even further downhill as soon as these twittering hi-hats and just a very simple bass drum snare pattern come into play. And typically Burial is so well known for how great his beats are and how interestingly they move and progress over the course of a track, but this rhythm just grows so stale so fast. It's really just like a synth pop song at this point, with way too much reverb and some cheesy going on in the background. It's kind of like a combination of a very lackluster and boringly written new wave single and like an Enya song coming together, and like Power Rangers. And what's even worse is the song Come Down to Us, not only because it features a lot of the same characteristics, but it's longer. It just does not know when to quit. And the singing is even worse than it is on the song Hiders. The singing is so off that the autotune can barely even cover it. Come on, you are a star. With this very repetitive synth line and drum pattern sort of playing out in the first half of this song, I feel like Burial is really, again, moving away from what he's pretty well known for and instead trying to churn out some auto-tuned pop ballads. For sure, his very cavernous production style is still in play. However, I wouldn't say that that's a saving grace of any of these tracks either. And I guess another thing that has remained unchanged is that he still has the ambition to write longer tracks. He is still kind of taking a handful of different ideas and stringing them out for 10, for 13 minutes. However, I would not say that this song gets any better in the second half. A lot like on the first track here, there's an ambient outro with some spoken word. A transgendered person is talking about coming to a point in life where this person accepted that they were worthy of love, of being loved, that they could be loved. Still, this does not make anything that happens in the second half of this song any more digestible for me, especially when the drum beat gets a lot more hyper and the song essentially to me goes like Free Willy soundtrack all the way. I find the tracks here that Burial has delivered, even though they are long and expansive from a melodic standpoint, from a rhythmic standpoint, to be really underwritten, underdeveloped. I don't really care for this sound when other people do it, and I especially don't care for it when Burial's doing it. If some of the vocal cuts on this thing weren't so cringe-worthy, then maybe the EP would have been more enjoyable for me, but the vocal performances used on these tracks are nowhere near as good as what has landed on Burial's previous EPs and pretty much everything that was on Untrue. So not only am I surprised that Burial has totally switched directions in a big way on this EP, but I'm also sort of surprised at the lack of quality control on the singing on these tracks. Unfortunately, I'm feeling a strong 4 to a light 5 on this thing. Transition. If you've given this EP a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Burial, Rival Dealer, forever.